Welcome back to the Ministry Path Podcast. My name is Danny Chan. I am the Ministerial Director at Southern California Conference. That means that I see my role as kind of the pastor's pastor. And in the Ministry Path Podcast, we've been talking about how we can walk on the ministry path with more intention and with more focus on the things that we perhaps haven't been talking about. So to do that, we usually have a guest that joins us on the podcast. And today I'm excited, super excited to welcome back, can I say this, international evangelist?
International, yeah, sure.
Pastor Tony Parrish. Yeah. Welcome back to Southern California Conference. Pastor Tony was a pastor in our conference a few years ago. But tell us a little bit more about yourself for those who don't know you. Where are you from, and how did you get here, and where are you now?
Yeah, so Danny, thanks for this opportunity. Great to be here again. Mm-hmm. I know my accent has strengthened since last we spoke, so hopefully people can understand me.
It has. I've been having a hard time understanding you.
Before, and now it's even worse. So yeah, my name is Tony. I'm a pastor in South New Zealand Conference. I was born actually in that country, on that island of the South Island of New Zealand. But yeah, I moved to the US in 2003 because my wife Jody is from Colorado, and so we were married, and then shortly thereafter I finished up at La Sierra University, and Jody began working across the street here at Glendale Adventist Medical Center in the Human Resources Department. So we lived out here in LA for quite a while, got picked up by Southern California Conference, and of course got to work with Danny Chan here at Eagle Rock Church, as well as Vallejo Drive,
That's
Norwalk. Right. And was there any others?
And then you went back. You were at Vallejo Drive twice. Is that what?
I think it was at Vallejo Drive once, Eagle Rock twice, and Norwalk once as a youth pastor there.
Excellent.
And then moved up to Northern California for a time at the Haven Church, and then over to Colorado. Did some teaching and chaplaincy and pastoring, kind of piecemeal it all together. And then in 2020, not knowing what was going to happen, we moved to New Zealand. Whoa. Just for a change of scenery. And have been there ever since. Have worked on both islands. For those of you who don't know, New Zealand's a couple of islands, North Island, South Island. And I worked for the first few years on the North Island in a town called New Plymouth, a couple of churches there. And at the beginning of last year, I moved to the South Island to Dunedin, which is the second city on the South Island, second largest city, to Christchurch, and am pastoring there, Dunedin Church, but we also have a university group called UNI, and also oversee another church in a town called Oamaru, about 90 minutes north, and we are also doing a church plant about 45 minutes south, Balclutha. And are really just looking to start a bit of a church planting network across our province of Otago.
Excellent. That sounds amazing. So you moved down there in 2020, right as the pandemic was hitting.
I know.
I'm pretty sure the pandemic hit you guys pretty strong. I was talking to this lady who's from Fiji, and I asked her how, during the peak of the pandemic, she was visiting here, and I asked her how the pandemic was and where were the statistics of COVID-19 cases, and she's like, yeah, there's been more recently. And I said, well, what's the percentage? And she's like, well, there was the doctor, there was the nurse, there was the she could count the amount of people who had COVID in the country. She knew who they were. Like that's how that's how minimal the impact was. How was it in New Zealand?
Well, I remember the phrases that the then Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was using. She would say, we're the team of 5 million, and we're going to go early and go hard, I think it was the phrase. And so, there was a few cases with, I guess the first strand, was it called Alpha, was it? Back the first strand of COVID, whatever it was called, COVID A. There was a few cases, and then they would have a press report every day at 1 p.m., and they'd give you the number of new cases and current cases. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, we quickly got to 0. And for quite a few, as the world was going crazy, we were sitting on 0 cases day by day.
Wow.
Because we went into lockdown quite early and quite strict.
Yeah.
And then by the time there was a lot more vaccine uptake and, the vaccine had improved, they released some of those restrictions. And so COVID did start going around then. But, people had good immunity by that point, and really it was
Wow.
less impactful than it has been in other countries.
Wow.
I haven't checked the numbers lately, but
Yeah.
I think, when they do all their reports and analysis, New Zealand will be somewhere close to the top of the list in terms of low fatality and so on.
So, Tony, you and I have been talking about ministry and the ministry differences between New Zealand and America, and even between the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, and in particular about evangelism. And I want to talk to you about evangelism. Recently, I had a conversation with a pretty well-known evangelist, and he was talking about how evangelism has changed dramatically in its purpose and intent over the last few decades, and we really need to be looking at evangelism just a little bit differently. And then you were telling me that you had an interesting experience with international evangelism. That's why I'm calling you the international evangelist now. Tell us a little bit about that and how that came to cross your ministry path.
For sure. I mean, first of all, I do not see myself at all as an evangelist in the traditional sense. In terms of gifting, I don't see that as my gift. And so when this opportunity came to go to Papua New Guinea, I initially declined. I was like, Ian, that's not really my thing to do public evangelism, right? A big event. You have a number of nights where you go through different doctrines each night. And I was like, that's not really for me. Then as the event began, the word came from our division president, and we are in the South Pacific Division, and the division president sent out an email, which was passed on to me through our union president, Eddie Tupai, and the president's name is Glenn Townend of the SPD, that they needed extra pastors because they were having evangelistic preaching, so public evangelism, on thousands of sites simultaneously across the country.
Did you say thousands of
thousands
sites?
And thousands.
Wow.
So every night, hundreds of thousands of people, probably in excess of 1 million people, were attending these evangelistic campaigns.
Wow.
And so at that point, I was like,
thousands of sites? So they have 1,000 evangelists, basically.
Yeah, so from all over the world, a lot of local pastors as well, but from around the South Pacific Division, so from Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands, but also from North America, from Europe, people who are willing to go all the way to PNG, to Papua New Guinea, were invited to go. And
so it sounds like for some people who might not have heard the news, that there is currently a revival happening, an outpouring of the Holy Spirit happening in Papua New Guinea. People are really responding to the Adventist message and the gospel by droves. So typically here in America, what we tend to do is we pick an evangelist, and then we pick a location, and then if we have the evangelist, we're hoping the people will come. It sounds like what's happening in Papua New Guinea is that they're having such an overwhelming response that they're planning these events without having evangelists lined up. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. People get sick or their travel plans fail, and so they didn't have enough people. And at that point, I put my hand up and I said, yeah, I'm happy to go. Now, of course, the added bit of information is that I actually grew up in Papua New Guinea as a missionary kid.
No way.
And so I still had some pidgin English tucked away in my brain, and I could get along fairly well in that language. And our team, or the team that I was about to join, was based in Bougainville. And Bougainville is an island that is quite a distance away from the mainland of Papua New Guinea, very close to the Solomon Islands, and is actually an autonomous region. Since the 90s, there was a civil war, and Bougainville now is the autonomous region of Bougainville. So they have their own president and their own mission, and I've never been there before. I've been to many parts of the country, but not this part. So this was a new experience for me as well. But I essentially just said on a Tuesday, I think, yeah, I can go. And then by that Wednesday, the following day, I was on a plane making my way up there.
So on Tuesday you said yes. The next day,
yeah,
you're on a plane to Papua New Guinea.
Indeed. And it was a long way to go from Dunedin, where I live, up to Auckland, over to Brisbane, up to Port Moresby, which is the capital of Papua New Guinea, and then over to Bougainville,
Wow. So talk to us about that. How long did it take, and what was it like to get there?
So yeah, I by the time they got my visa ready and my flights ready, I was leaving that following afternoon up to Auckland, and I got in late, so straight into a hotel, and then up early the next day on a flight from Auckland to Brisbane, which is about 3 hours, and then a little layover, and up to Port Moresby, which was probably another 3 or 4 hours. Had to stay in a hotel again that night, so that would have been Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
And then had to figure out how to, well, not figure out, it was figured out for me, but it's always a little bit of a dicey situation as to whether or not you're going to be able to make it, if there's going to be a plane, if there's going to be a maintenance issue, if they're running on time. And at this time, there was a fuel shortage in Papua New Guinea, and they were prioritizing certain flights. And because of the political situation of the autonomous region of Bougainville, those flights were deprioritized, and to some of the other sites which are more central to the main island or the mainland, they were not necessarily going to make it to Bougainville. But praise the Lord, I was able to make it and land on a little island next to the island.
Okay.
So we're even on a small island next to this big island of Bougainville, but there's no bridge from that island to the big island.
Mm-hmm. So you have to take a ferry.
I had to take a ferry.
Okay.
But first, to get to the ferry, there's got to be a truck, and there was no truck to take me, so we had to sit there and wait, and phone calls were made, and then I ended up meeting with the team who were on that small island just down the street, because there was a couple of sites on that island. And so I sat there with them for a couple of hours. We also had a representative from the Hope Channel doing some recording, so all of a sudden I jumped in as the, I don't even know what they're called, but the person holding the microphone and doing the cards and helping them do some interviews. And yeah, finally our boat turned up and we jumped on it.
So basically your plane landed in the airport.
Yeah.
But no one was there to pick you up.
Yeah, it's a hope for the best. Hopefully the message has got there. Hopefully the phone call has happened, the email's gone through, and somebody on the other end has decided to rock up. So
third world country, like different rules. Yeah, so that's that. Sure. You're on the mission field.
Having grown up there, like I knew to expect, as they say, right? The cliche, expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
And you just got to be chill, and it's going to work out eventually.
Mm-hmm. So you're waiting for a few hours, and then eventually, what? The truck shows up.
The truck. The truck showed up. That wasn't too long at the airport. Took me to the first little hotel down the street. Then waiting for the ferry. That was a few hours. And it's not like a ferry that you drive on. It's just a long wooden boat with an engine on the back. And they throw your bags on, you jump on, it starts to rain, and you go across the little strait between the two islands. And then you get to the other side, there's like a big marketplace, a central place where everyone is kind of coming and going, and there is no one to pick us up. And so they're trying to figure out how to get us there. And the only vehicle they have there, pretty much the only vehicle, is a Toyota Land Cruiser. It is the vehicle of choice because you got rocks and bumpy roads and rivers and all that kind of stuff to get through. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to figure out how to get us to where we needed to go, including the crew from the Hope Channel with all of their gear, their cameras and microphones and all that kind of stuff. And so we sat there in that market for quite a few hours on a Friday afternoon in the heat. But you just got to roll with it.
You got to go.
You just got to roll with it. Yeah.
You got to go.
And eventually all the shops were shutting and we're still sitting there waiting. And then a truck turned up from the mission office. So they had sent that truck some hours ago to come north.
Yeah.
And we just were waiting for it to turn up. And it did.
And it did.
And we threw our stuff in and off we go.
Wow. Like some Indiana Jones kind of journey.
Yeah,
right?
almost.
All right. All right. So then you're heading in this truck and you're driving how long?
Yeah, a few hours. So it's not very far as the crow flies, but it's a very windy road. It's made of river rocks or sand or just whatever materials that section of the road they have close by. Mm-hmm. That's what they put on the road. It could be volcanic rock. It could be just dirt. Mm-hmm. And the weather there is wild. So a lot of the rivers come up suddenly and bridges are washed out. And so where the bridge used to be, the road kind of just diverted across the river and then back up again onto the road. There were sections of it, a few hundred meters that were sealed maybe around a village, or maybe there was a school or something, a hospital, and so they sealed that small section, but then back onto the bumpy washboard, really just boom, boom,
Like,
boom, boom, boom.
You're moving like this the whole time.
Yeah.
Wow.
You got to hold on.
Yeah.
You got to hold on.
All right.
And the sun is setting, we're crossing rivers, and there's just river crossing after river crossing after river crossing to get to the place that we were going to be based at for the next 2 weeks. And the cool thing was that as we were going, our driver was like, oh, there's another site. And so we were seeing some
Like
of the other evangelistic
evangelistic
sites off the side of the road, or they'd point out, up this road, just up to the mountains, there's another site up there, there's another church up here.
Wow.
And so there were on Bougainville over 100 sites just on that island
Wait,
alone.
100 evangelistic, like crusade type of sites.
And listen, it might sound like I got a fairly rugged experience, but I got to go to my site in a vehicle. Some of our other preachers had to go in boats or had to walk and kind of hike into their regions.
Into the jungle.
Into the jungle, absolutely. Absolutely. They were kind of living the life of the
David Livingston. Like in those...
I don't know if people know the story of Bougainville and its significance during World War II, but there were Japanese soldiers who held out on Bougainville for decades, hiding in the jungle, thinking that the war was still going. Wow. So that's the kind of territory that you can hide out for 20 or 30 years.
Wow. Those are all the stories we hear about.
Yeah.
And this is one of the places where those soldiers actually were. Amazing. So then you finally get there after a few hours. A few hours of this kind of going up and down rivers.
And it's dark, pitch dark.
It's nighttime.
There's no lights. It's nighttime.
Okay.
It's Friday evening, so it's Sabbath now. And we are just driving into the darkness. And a lot of places there's no electricity. There's no central electrical provider. And so some places might have a generator. You'll see a light or two, but a lot of places it's just dark.
It's just dark.
So you don't even know if you're passing something or not. And eventually we get to our station. It's a government station, like where they have clinics and government buildings and a school. And we just turn up and we pull right up to the stage. And I get greeted by the local pastor, and he's like, "Oh, you can come up and preach now."
Wait,
so
what?
So, and the clothes that I had on, like I think I pulled a collared shirt out of my bag real quick and threw it on, wrinkly and everything, as best I could. Maybe threw a tie on, and then I go up on the stage, just straight up preaching. They've been waiting there since 6 p.m. and it's like close to 10 p.m. now. Wow. And there's a few hundred people who are sitting in the grass in the dark, waiting for this to kick off.
So what? Like they were literally waiting for the preacher to arrive, so that this thing can get going.
Indeed, yeah.
So you had some prep time, right, to brush up on your sermon,
and of course, no prep time.
No?
Like I had not been part of the team. I had when the opportunity came, I says, "Oh no, I won't go this time." And this is last minute. They needed somebody. I says, "Fine, I can go. No worries." And so they had just sent me the sermons. There's quite a few of them, and you trying to learn the slides and the notes that go with them. Yeah. And
so is this coordinated like all of the other sites? Are they doing the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're doing the same sermons, same series.
So
you're trying to coincide with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So then, of course, though, I was expecting, it's 10 o'clock, everyone's going to be gone.
Yeah, right.
And so I was just ready to go to sleep. But now I'm on. So, thankfully I wasn't fresh out of seminary or something and freaking out like, I can do a sermon at the drop of a hat, no problem.
Yep.
So I kind of knew...
Be ready in season and out of season.
Exactly. So I kind of knew the topic and I was like, I'm not going to have time to set up the computer and everything. Mm-hmm. I'll just roll with something.
Yeah.
Grab my Bible and away we go.
Yep.
But of course I get up there and all of a sudden there's these two ladies and they start taking off my shoes. I was like, this is an unexpected surprise. I don't remember this tradition. And so they're doing that. And then the pastor, he's like, they're just washing your feet. He whispers in my ear. I was like, oh, it's no problem. Like I just am expecting that things are going to happen that I don't know it's happening, and then it's happening, and I'm like, just
it's
go
just
with
like
it.
A common tradition, right? Before you have to speak, they wash your feet.
They were washing my feet because this was the first night.
A very biblical tradition. Amazing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So you step onto the stage.
They do a song, and then boom, I'm up to a sermon.
And these people are they're like, if a speaker is late here in America, people
They're
don't
gone.
wait.
No.
But there they were waiting for hours. They're
Yeah.
like hungry to hear the message.
And then I get up and it's super disappointing. Right.
What? No, stop.
No, yeah,
I'm
very
sure they
respectful,
appreciated you.
very respectful, and they've been singing, they've been encouraging each other. They're on their way, they're coming, they'll be here soon, and yeah, then off we go.
Then you preach a sermon and you have the meeting.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, in those moments, it's no point just thinking, "What am I going to do?"
Yeah.
I mean, you just go.
You just got to roll with it.
Yeah, you open your Bible, you pick a verse.
Yep.
And that kind of leads itself to another verse and another point or a story, and away you go.
And the Lord, gives you a message, right? It reminds me of a story. My dad had a similar experience early in his ministry. He was practicing in Mexico in Chiapas, and I think he had over 20 churches that he used to attend to, and some of them were way up in the mountains, like not accessible by car. They had to like ride these donkeys and through rivers and then through mountains. There was one time that he did that. He said it rained on them 4 times and the sun dried it up every single time, and then it kept raining.
I could tell you about the rain.
They finally got there, and same thing. They were waiting for him at church. And they said, "Pastor, you're ready to go." They've been singing. We've been singing songs for hours, and finally you're here. So they need a message. So he thought he was going to get there and preach the next day. They were waiting. Same thing, right? So he preaches a sermon, and he finishes his sermon, and he's tired, he's hungry, he hasn't eaten all day, and then he sits down, and then the head elder comes up to him and says, "Pastor, they don't want to go home. Like, can you preach another sermon?" He's like, "What?" So same thing, like you got to react. So he looks at his Bible, he's like, all right, he preaches another sermon. He sits down again. Nobody wants to go home. He preaches 3 sermons back to back on an empty stomach after. So it sounds like it's just like when you're out in the mission field, you got to be open for anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to be ready. And so, thankfully, they didn't ask me to preach 3 times in a row.
That was my next question.
They just said, "Okay, we'll see you at 5 a.m. and you can do worship with the team, and then you're going to do
at 5 a.m.
Yeah, then you're going to do a devotional with everybody. Then you're going to do Sabbath school. Then you're going to do church service. Then you're going to do baptisms."
Wow!
And I was like, "All right, let's go."
That's a full day.
And then we go back to the house that we're staying at, and they crank up, on the generator, and they've got some food for me, some great plantains and pawpaw or papaya, some fish and some cabbage. I ate a lot of cabbage, I can tell you that, over that
trip.
Did
you eat any fish?
I did eat some fish.
Wait, aren't you vegetarian?
I am, but I want to be polite there, Danny, but my politeness ran out after 3 days. I'm like, okay, they I've had my full of fish.
I guess they don't have the health message there yet, right?
No, I mean, it was pretty healthy. Pretty healthy. It was a lot of greens. But food plays an important part. But we'll wrap around back to that in a little bit.
Yeah. So, but rations are it's not like it was a lavish meal, right? It was.
Oh no, it was basic, but there was plenty.
Okay,
there was plenty, and they let me kind of eat first, and I'm trying to encourage them. No, come eat. Let's eat together.
Okay.
But you gotta. That's culture. They want to.
No, they got the international evangelists there, so they want to feed them.
So I just pass out. I'm exhausted. And then thinking I'll get up just before 5, I'll have time. But no, 4 o'clock they start banging on a bell or like some kind of metal thing, and just boom, 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 and everyone's got to get up. And so I'm like, I guess I'm up. And yeah, the day started, and
so you went
just roll with it,
like devotional, Sabbath school, like preaching again.
Yeah.
Amazing. And the people were it sounds like they're just hungry, right? They just want to hear the message.
And here's the thing, is that we were rolling right into a baptism. And you think about the traditional kind of evangelistic campaign is that you've been planning to do this for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And maybe at the end of it, people might come to an appeal. They might sign up. Maybe there'll be a big baptism at the end.
Yeah, you're hoping, you're praying for.
Yeah, maybe they're just signing up for more Bible studies, and then there's a baptism in their local context or whatever. Yeah. But no, they had 40 people ready to go that following. That day, that Sabbath day.
The very first Sabbath.
Very first Sabbath.
Wow.
And as I start listening to the stories of how this is to be, I find out that this has been essentially an 8-year process. Because this was originally planned to happen in 2020. And of course, it didn't happen in 2020 because nothing happened in 2020.
Yes.
In terms of big events.
Yeah.
And so from 2016, this had been like an initiative from the General Conference. They were going to support a field. This in Papua New Guinea was the choice to really invest in to help them do discipleship, small groups and things and plan for an event in 2020, which didn't happen.
So the plan was to have thousands of evangelistic series in 2020.
Yeah. And
so they had ramped up and geared up and done some work.
Done a little bit of work, done a fair amount of work. But when they looked back, they were like, well, thank the Lord, it did not happen in 2020. Thankfully, there was a pandemic.
Why is that?
Because they were able to kind of refocus. They'd been focusing around established churches. But those established churches with their attendance became too much, right, for the restrictions around COVID.
Right.
And so they very much went into small groups, small projects, kind of branch Sabbath schools. They just had little pockets of worship and study all over the place. And so when I turn up on that Friday night and then into that Sabbath afternoon baptizing people, obviously this has nothing to do with the fact that I preached that day or the previous day. Zero to do with that.
So it's not like, wow, Pastor Tony, your message was so captivating. No. Your appeal was so powerful. 40 people responded.
Not to mention that, like, I'm speaking some in Pidgin English, certainly doing the verses, like reading the verses in Pidgin. But of course, this is Bougainville, right?
Yeah.
The autonomous region of Bougainville. Pidgin English is not their main language. They have their own local languages, which has also different regional dialects. And so I don't speak that at all. It's a completely different language. The only word I learned was vokiado, which means good evening. I learned good morning too, but I can't remember what it was. So
Pig Latin, like, how do you say like good morning, Danny? I'm happy to be here.
You all right, Danny?
Yes.
Mi hamamas? I'm happy.
Mi hamamas?
Hamamas is happy. Yeah.
Okay.
It's one of those things.
So you're
things,
mixing
right?
that in.
My favorite word is gyaman.
Gyaman.
That means you're lying. All right. I just like say, oh, gyaman.
So you're mixing that into the message.
And of course, it's been years since I've used that language. I was a kid. I left when I was like 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And
so there's
so
something.
It just starts coming back as you're using it more. And I could read the text because I could read it and pronounce it, not necessarily knowing all the words per se. But, that was a good way to connect. But of course, a lot of the people there didn't even have a good functioning ability in English or in Pidgin English because they spoke their own local language. And
so it wasn't about the message or the content or even.
It was nice to come together. It was nice to fellowship. It was nice to sing together, to hear from the word, to be a part of that atmosphere. But that was not the thing that did it. So what happened is that in 2020 they had to kind of re-establish their entire plan, delay it until they can have big events again, and they changed their tactics. They went a lot smaller, a lot more of them all over the place. A lot more lay-led instead of pastor-led or elder-led even. So they were just equipping and training people all over the place in these small groups.
So this is where we're circling back around to this idea of how evangelism has changed over time.
Absolutely.
This actually tracks a lot with that conversation that I had with this well-known evangelist, which I hope to talk about in the future. That the purpose of the evangelistic series is not to begin a formal string of teachings, while it could be to reinforce. It is kind of like a culmination of a lot of work that's being done.
It's a harvest.
What are the kinds of things then that are part of the evangelism process earlier on?
So Bougainville, as an island, was like the last entered region in Papua New Guinea by the Adventist Church. So they're just having their centenary. So it's 100 years ago that the first missionaries arrived on a boat from New Zealand to bring the Adventist message. And they didn't have their first baptism on the island until, almost a decade later after they first arrived. And so this island does not have the dominance that Adventism has in other parts of the country. Bougainville is very much mostly Catholic. And so there's various regions that are completely untouched by the Adventist message. And there are clinics, schools, all kinds of things that the Catholic Church operates. And so instead of trying to just replicate and duplicate and be in competition with,
compete with
the folks decided that, well, let's help. If we think health is important, we should help the local clinic be the best clinic it can be. We should help the local school be the best school it can be if we believe in education. And so one of the projects that they did was there was a Catholic clinic in a very heavily Catholic area, and the Adventist church leaders and elders and lay people said, well, we have the skills to be able to connect this clinic to running water. We can dig the ditches, run the pipes, and so this clinic can have running water. And so they did that.
Wow.
But out of that, the local chief said, hey, why don't you guys have a church up here too? And gave them a plot of land for them to raise their own church.
What?
But they did not go into that thinking, well, let's do this so that we can have influence with the chief in order for this outcome to happen in our benefit.
So for decades, they have been trying to establish a church there, but have not been able to. Right. It wasn't until they helped the Catholic clinic that it wasn't what the Catholic Church did. It was what the local chief, who's the one who allows this, he's the one who recognized the good they were doing. And they said, okay, now you can have a church here.
Yeah, and so he's Catholic chief, right?
Wow.
And they
have had a plot of land.
Yeah, and they have had a lot of difficulty trying to figure out how do we introduce Adventism to these various places. We can't even get a foothold.
Right.
And so it's not as if they're like, well, this will give us a foothold.
Right.
It wasn't disingenuous like that. It's like, well, what are we aiming for here? We want people to be healthy. We want, pregnant women to be able to go to see a nurse. We want kids to be healthy. We want somewhere for people to go in an emergency. This aligns with our mission, so we should help them as well. Right. And that's what they did. And
without
any
guarantee, that this was gonna
correct. And so the unknown outcome was they got a plot of land, and I was able to visit that church, which was also then a site for this evangelistic effort, PNG for Christ.
It's interesting, as you know, like evangelism or community outreach and engagement here in America, in many churches, it's very transactional, right? It's like, okay, we want to do like a stop smoking clinic, or we want to do this, but only if it's going to yield in some kind of a interest, right? Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
either
absolutely.
here or in New Zealand? Like, is there ever times when people are like, well, they might not want to do some good that needs to be done in the community because they don't think that it will be beneficial to evangelism?
Right. I mean, we have had a big campaign in New Zealand in recent years that really did not have the outcome that it was intended to have. And so, we call that, well, that was a failure. Like, it didn't, where are the baptisms? Where are the interests? Where are the Bible studies? None of that happened. And we really haven't, I don't think, reflected too deeply about how we should be structuring our evangelism, and not just as an event, but really as the whole notion of why we do something, of what we're doing it for. Because ultimately, if you're doing it for the Adventist church, for the Adventist message, and not for the people in the community that you serve,
right,
there's a mismatch there, right?
That's right.
I'm going to come in here to do this for me.
Yeah, it's a transaction, right?
Yeah, and
I'll only do it if it benefits me.
And if it's not working out, I'll just call it a failure and move on to another place.
Right.
But this is really about investing in a community for their good, and maybe evangelism will come out of it.
That's right. So to be salt to the earth for the benefit of being faithful to what Jesus asked, whether it, without trying to control the outcome, right? So it sounds like in Papua New Guinea, that's kind of the approach. So they started to do community
work,
engagement.
health work. They have schools that Adventist schools that were helping in getting the message out, inviting parents to different activities to help them, using the school as kind of like a center of influence. Really just investing in good relationships with the community.
And the other component, as I've studied this revival, is that because they weren't able to meet together in groups of larger than 10, they started to meet in homes in groups of 10.
Yeah, homes. They started to build, small structures. They're experts at just throwing something up to keep yourself out of the weather, because there's a lot of weather, rain and heavy rain and wind. And it was kind of just an organic, natural way of, we can't meet together, but let's just keep meeting in smaller groups,
right?
And way more of them. And it was actually a blessing in disguise. This past week, I have been at the Exponential Conference in Orlando, and the president of the Papua New Guinea Union Mission was there, Pastor Malachi, and they actually brought him up on stage in front of 5,000 or 6,000 other pastors and church leaders from all different denominations and backgrounds. And he talked about this effort in Papua New Guinea, and he got a standing ovation from that audience there, of Baptists and evangelicals and Lutherans and Adventists and all kinds of people from different backgrounds, just understanding the enormity of what had been achieved through God's guidance.
And just to recap that enormity, how many baptisms how many people have been baptized in Papua New Guinea in the last couple of years?
So believe it or not, from that 2-week campaign, right? During the campaign itself, and this is a estimate, right? Because we can't even be sure of the exact number, but the conservative number is 300,000.
300,000 new baptisms.
Yeah, and this is across thousands of sites, and so really, really hard to ascertain exactly the number, because people are just writing down on a piece of paper, trying to get details, but it's not like people have addresses.
They don't
and
have
stuff
iPad check-ins for these baptisms and all that.
So that's a conservative estimate. So we just put 300,000 plus.
Wow.
So that first Sabbath, I baptized, I think it was between 3 of us pastors, we baptized about 40 people at our site, which for Bougainville was unheard of, right? In 100 years of there being a mission there. Amazing. And then the following Sabbath, we baptized another 50 or 60.
Wow. Amazing.
And then just in the ocean, as soon as church finishes, we all walk down, the entire crowd down to the ocean. We walk in and we baptize 3 at a time. And it was beautiful. And
Amazing.
they of course did an appeal afterwards.
Yeah.
And there was probably 3 or 4 times as many people who responded to the appeal than were actually baptized.
So to begin a study journey.
Right, to start this over again.
Wow, amazing. And I'm sure that happened in a lot of the other thousands of sites.
Yeah, so from there we jumped in the car, no time to celebrate. We drove up to another site because they only had one pastor. And as soon as we got there, come down, we're in the river, and this time not the ocean, a very fast flowing river with rocks and boulders that kind of moved and created a somewhat of a pool that we could be safe in, put a bamboo safety rail around it. And we started baptizing there. That was another 30 or 40. And then again, jump in the car, next site, which was a high school. And they had just finished, but they had baptized, I think, 120 students.
Wow.
So that happened from site to site to site.
So you got a chance to go to the different sites to baptize along the way. To see this part of this amazing over 300,000 people response, and that's going to continue. So, this whole story is fascinating to me because it really should inform the way that we do evangelism here in America, and certainly in other parts of the world, is to see evangelism not as the beginning of a journey, but to see it as the culmination of what you're saying is community work that you do for the benefit of the community, not just as a transaction, for the relationships that you're building and faith sharing that happens in small groups, and other kinds of approaches that kind of begin people on a journey. Obviously, Bible study and discipling, and then eventually to have some kind of a reaping event. We need
Right.
to see evangelism meetings more as a reaping event at the end, as opposed to the beginning of a journey. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you kind of have to work into the natural flow of people's lives, and a special event is not really part of somebody's everyday life. But going to school, going to the clinic, going to the market, those are part of life, and those are where you come alongside people and you're living life together. You're experiencing things together. You're experiencing a new baby or an illness or a financial difficulty or all of those things that make connections meaningful. Because the gospel in a vacuum of just words from a preacher's mouth are not really fantastic and amazing unless you also see how they work in real life, you know?
Right.
And in Papua New Guinea, that's what they showed.
Yeah.
And there was just miracle after miracle. Do you have time for a miracle?
Share me one of those. You're in Papua New Guinea. There's got to be one, right?
So talking about that food, right, and
Yeah.
the fish that I kind of struggled through for 3 days. But so we're there for 2 weeks, and they have come from 3, 4, 5 hours away, not in their car. They've come by foot, and they've carried with them everything that they needed for this camp out, basically.
So it's basically like a camp meeting, right? Everyone just kind of walks their tents and makeshift living arrangement, and they bring it, including all their food.
Including their food. They might bring a tarp, or they'll bring a big knife, and they'll cut down a few bamboo things, or some palm fronds to make a roof and to make a shelter that they can stay in for the week.
Right.
They're not bringing their camper van or their RV.
Their what is that, stream?
The Airstream. No Airstreams. They're bringing the tools with which they can build something.
Okay.
But we're well into this now, and I'm hearing from the elders that they're running out of food, and so this is before the second Sabbath, and they're thinking that they're going to need to go home and harvest quit early, harvest their gardens, and find food because the market's empty. There is not anything else they can get easily,
right?
And then
they're looking to the pastor, and it's like, Pastor, how do we feed this multitude?
Let me teach you this new fishing skill that I've developed. No, but no, it's like I don't have much to offer you, but what I have, I'll offer you. Let's pray, and we're praying, and the elders are praying, and then an amazing thing happens. I'm hearing all this excitement, and I go down to the beach. And there's a river that comes down, and there's this swarm of fish, like little juvenile fish. In New Zealand, we call them whitebait. And, it's a delicacy, and people make all kinds of things out of them, and it's really expensive. So this whitebait swarm is happening. And you're talking about millions upon millions of fish swarming down the river, to go out to the sea to grow into a big fish. And, I mean, you could just throw your hands in and pull them up out of the water.
No way.
Like people were out there just running with buckets, with nets, with whatever they could grab a hold of to catch these fish.
What?
And all of a sudden people were like, this is just like Moses and the Exodus and manna from heaven, like this fish from heaven, the miracle of the fish. And people are praising God, and they're gathering all this fish together. They're packaging it up, not just for cooking it then, but also for taking it home with them for their return journey, 3, 4, 5 hours walk.
Wow.
And this allows them to get through the next few days of the evangelistic event and get to the baptism and then get home again.
Wow.
And this became the miracle of the fish. Not became, it was. I mean, it was huge. And, to be honest, like, I'm kind of a bit of a skeptic with these evangelistic things because I'm like, public evangelism, it's modern now. Surely there's another way to do it.
Yeah.
But this is just showing there is another way to do it. It doesn't exclude public evangelism. It just puts it in a proper and appropriate context where people are still coming to know Christ through that relational I care about you.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to care about you until I get a decision or one way or the other.
Right.
I'm just going to care about you because you're a human being and I'm a human being, and we can love each other.
The model, sometimes the way that we think about when evangelism doesn't work is that we have this whole series. Some people happen to respond to it, and then we have to figure out whether we can incorporate them into the church and give them job responsibilities, like to begin the relational component of it.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't happen, as
Right.
we know, right?
Yeah.
But you're talking about something that's where it actually starts, right? Developing relationships, teaching them spiritual disciplines, and to learn about the message. And so I love what you said about putting the evangelistic meeting in its proper context. And when it does, amazing, even miraculous things can happen. Right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Tony, thank you so much for sharing that with us and for sharing that amazing journey. And as we continue to discuss the implications of how evangelism has shifted, we know that we're going to be blessed as we seek to try to be faithful.
I haven't even got to share the journey back to the airport.
Oh my goodness.
We'll have to save that for another time.
We'll have to save that for another episode.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tony, for being with us, for joining us. And thank
Pleasure
you
to be here.
for being a part of the Ministry Path podcast. You're welcome to subscribe. We're going to have so many more conversations and stories to share. So subscribe if you'd like to be notified about that. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.